All right, ready for this? Let's do it, man. Looking sharp already. Feels great.
The little bell above the door jingled as Ozzy Osbourne stepped into the cozy barber shop. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the worn leather chairs and neatly lined bottles of hair products. Ozzy, dressed casually in a black hoodie and dark sunglasses, nodded at the barber, a burly man with a thick mustache and an air of quiet confidence. He was here for a simple haircut, nothing flashy, just a trim before an evening rehearsal. As Ozzy sank into the chair, the barber ran his fingers through his hair, sizing him up. Then, with a half-smile and a hint of curiosity in his voice, he muttered almost to himself, "The guy who sang Paranoid, he's a maniac, isn't he?" The words hung in the air. For a moment the shop went silent. A couple of regular customers froze mid-scroll on their phones, whispering to one another. The tension was palpable. Ozzy tilted his head slightly, removing his sunglasses for a better look at the man who dared speak so boldly. But instead of anger or indignation, a slow, amused smile spread across his face. "A maniac, huh? That's one way to put it," he said, voice calm but tinged with humor. The barber chuckled nervously, snipping Ozzy's hair with slightly more caution. Ozzy leaned back, relaxed, as if he were just another customer. His hands rested on his lap, and he watched the barber's every move, eyes twinkling with quiet amusement. The other patrons couldn't help but steal glances. Some whispered, "That really is him, that's Ozzy Osbourne." Ozzy's reaction was subtle but magnetic. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scowl. He simply let the moment breathe, letting the barber and the room realize that perhaps the wild stories about him were only half true. What Ozzy did next shocked everyone in the shop. The audience now leans in. They want to know, how will Ozzy respond if the barber pushes further? Will he snap, or will his calm, almost playful nature turn the situation upside down? The scissors paused midair. As the barber glanced at Ozzy with a mix of curiosity and mischief, he was warming up to the moment, feeling a strange thrill in speaking freely to a rock legend without realizing how tense the room had become. "I mean all that crazy stuff in your songs," the barber said louder this time, leaning over slightly. "I wouldn't want to live your life, man. That paranoid stuff must be intense." The regulars in the shop exchanged nervous looks. Phones peeked out from pockets and bags, cameras ready to capture what was about to unfold. Some whispered, "Is he really talking to Ozzy Osbourne?" Ozzy, sitting back in the chair, didn't flinch. His black hoodie shadowed most of his face, but his eyes, sharp and twinkling, followed every movement. Calm and collected, he leaned slightly toward the barber and said with quiet amusement, "Intense, maybe on stage. Off stage, I just like a good haircut and a little peace." The barber chuckled, but there was a nervous edge now. He snipped again, the rhythmic sound of the scissors filling the momentary silence. "Really, I've heard stories, parties, wild nights, crazy music," he continued, voice rising slightly, almost teasing. "Do you even sleep?" The tension in the room grew. The other patrons were frozen, torn between excitement and disbelief. Some glanced at each other, whispering, "Wow, he's keeping calm. That's Ozzy Osbourne for real." Ozzy shook his head slightly, his voice calm, warm, but carrying a hint of humor. "You know, everyone thinks my life is all chaos. But the truth, I enjoy the simple things, music, family, and getting a haircut without drama." The barber froze mid-snippet, realizing he might have pushed a little too far. But his curiosity won over caution, and he leaned in again, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "I just can't imagine, with all that energy, all that intensity, how do you stay sane?" Ozzy smiled knowingly. "Sanity's overrated, but respect and patience, that's how you get through life. And it helps to laugh at the stories people tell about you." The crowd of customers, now quietly filming, felt the moment shift. The tension melted into fascination. They weren't witnessing a maniac, they were witnessing a legend diffuse judgment with humor and humility. Have you ever had someone talk boldly about a celebrity in front of them? Comment your story below. We want to know what you would have done in this situation. As the clip of Ozzy's calm, witty response floated in the room, the barber's nervous laughter filled the space. He continued the haircut more carefully, glancing occasionally at Ozzy, now unsure if he was being tested or quietly entertained. And in that simple, sunlit barber shop, The story of a maniac, or so they thought, began to unravel. The legend of Ozzy Osbourne was alive, not in wild tales, but in his calm, magnetic presence. The barber adjusted his stance, snipping deliberately, as if each cut gave him courage to push the conversation further. He'd started joking, teasing lightly, in part two, but now, with Ozzy quietly observing him, the energy in the room shifted. There was curiosity and a thin line of tension. Seriously, though, I've heard stories, the barber said, leaning a little closer, lowering his voice as if revealing a dark secret. Crazy nights, breaking things on stage. I don't know how anyone lives like that. Do you even sleep? The words barely left his lips before the room reacted. A hush fell over the few regulars scattered on the worn leather chairs. Phones peeked from pockets, cameras pointed discreetly, and everyone exchanged nervous glances. Some were fascinated, others were on edge, whispering, "He's really saying that to Ozzy Osbourne." Ozzy, however, remained calm. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't roll his eyes. He leaned back, one hand resting lightly on his lap, a slight smile curling under his mustache. His aura was magnetic, relaxed, yet full of quiet command. "I sleep just fine," Ozzy replied, his tone warm, amused, and slightly teasing. "But you know, the stories are always louder than reality." "Music's loud, life doesn't have to be." The barber froze mid-snippet. For a moment, he wasn't sure if Ozzy was mocking him or just having fun, but there was no mockery, only charm, humility, and that unmistakable presence of a legend who didn't need to prove anything. "I just can't imagine it." The barber pressed, trying to understand, leaning in a little. "All that energy, that intensity, how do you stay sane?" Ozzy's eyes twinkled behind his shades. A slow, deliberate smile crossed his face. "Sanity is overrated," he said softly, "but patience, respect, humor, those are the real tools. And a good haircut doesn't hurt either." The barber laughed nervously, glancing at the other patrons who were now silently watching, holding their phones ready to capture every word. They were witnessing not a maniac, not the wild front-page stories. They were witnessing a human being, calm, witty, and disarmingly humble. But the barber wasn't done yet. Curiosity had a way of overpowering caution. He leaned closer again, whispering almost conspiratorially, I can't picture your life. Parties, chaos, wild energy. Is it really as crazy as people say?" Ozzy chuckled, a low, melodic laugh that seemed to fill the room. "People love to tell stories about me," he said. "And yes, the music and the stage, that's intense. But off stage, I'm just a man. I enjoy the little things, a good haircut, a laugh, a quiet moment in the sun, and maybe a bit of mischief, just enough to keep life interesting." The barber paused, scissors midair, realizing he was speaking to someone much deeper than the legend he assumed. The tension in the room softened, replaced by fascination and awe. The other customers murmured excitedly, their recordings capturing a rare, candid glimpse of a rock icon. Would you confront someone whose reputation seemed larger than life, or would you just sit back and watch? Type your answer in the comments. As Ozzy leaned back, the barber resumed cutting, now respectful and slightly nervous, the earlier bravado replaced by awe. The room felt warmer, lighter. The legend wasn't a maniac. He wasn't an untouchable star. He was just Ozzy, calm, witty, human, and unforgettable. Every snip of the scissors, every subtle smile, every carefully chosen word built anticipation. The audience could feel it. The story was far from over. There was more humor, more shock, and a moment of true revelation yet to come.
This is incredible, man. A real honor. Thanks, I appreciate that. Can we get a picture?
The barber paused, scissors hovering midair, as if sensing that the moment had shifted. Something in Ozzy's calm demeanor made him rethink the bold remarks he had been tossing around. Customers leaned in, silently observing, phones poised to capture every subtle gesture. One of the younger patrons whispered to his friend, barely audible, "Wait, that's Ozzy Osbourne, isn't it? The guy who sang Paranoid." The words spread like wildfire. Another customer glanced up from his phone. "No way, that's the Prince of Darkness, sitting right there in the barber chair." The barber's jaw tightened slightly. He had thought he was speaking freely, joking boldly. But now, with recognition dawning in the room, the air changed. He realized he wasn't just speaking to a rock legend. He was speaking to a man who had spent decades commanding stages, inspiring millions, and surviving the wildest rumors imaginable. Ozzy, noticing the whispers, did something remarkable. He didn't name, drop, he didn't gloat, he didn't make a show. Instead, he smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both warmth and subtle amusement. "I've heard people say the strangest things about me," Ozzy said calmly, eyes scanning the room with playful intent. "But the truth is, I'm just a guy who likes a haircut, a laugh, and a little bit of mischief. Nothing more, nothing less." The barber, still mid-snippet, couldn't help but laugh nervously. The nervous tension that had crept into the room began to dissolve. The other patrons, initially hesitant to react, now whispered excitedly among themselves, "He's normal. I thought he'd be completely unapproachable. Wow, he's actually really funny." Ozzy's wit was effortless, yet magnetic. He had turned the situation entirely on its head without raising his voice or making anyone feel small. The barber, who had once assumed he was confronting a maniac, now felt a mix of respect and awe. Life gets a little messy. Ozzy continued, his tone calm and measured, but I find it's best to take it lightly. Music is intense, fame is strange, but a little humor and a good haircut keep you grounded. The barber nodded, almost apologetically, as if realizing how brash he had been. He resumed the haircut with more care, snipping with a newfound respect. Every move he made was deliberate, careful not to disturb the calm aura Ozzy radiated, and, Ozzy added with a mischievous grin, "If you really think I'm wild, just wait until you see me dance after this haircut." Laughter rippled through the shop. Even the quietest customers smiled, caught between amazement and amusement. The whispers of recognition now turned into admiration. "He's humble," one patron murmured, "not the monster everyone says he is. And funny, too," another added. Ozzy's charm lay not just in his words, but in his quiet confidence. The man who had dominated stadiums with electrifying performances could command attention in the smallest barbershop with nothing more than a smile and a measured comment. For the barber, it was a revelation. He realized that the legend he had thought he knew, the man whose songs told tales of chaos and mania, was far more human than the stories suggested. And in that small, sunlit barbershop, Ozzy Osbourne had done what he did best. He disarmed tension with humor, humility, and effortless wit. Have you ever met someone whose reputation didn't match reality? Comment below with your story, we want to know. By the time the haircut was halfway done, the shop's atmosphere had completely transformed. What started as tension and mild fear had turned into fascination, admiration, and laughter. Ozzy's calm wit had turned the barber's boldness into respect, leaving everyone in the room quietly inspired. The audience now waits with bated breath. How will the barber respond next? Will he push further, or will Ozzy continue to guide the interaction with humor and grace? The story was far from over. The real revelations were yet to come. The barber continued snipping, but now with a noticeably different energy. His earlier boldness had faded, replaced by awe and curiosity. He kept stealing glances at Ozzy Osbourne, who sat in the chair with a relaxed, almost mischievous air. "I just don't get it," the barber admitted, lowering his scissors. "All the stories the wild shows the crazy lifestyle. I don't understand how you do it." Ozzy tilted his head slightly, as if weighing how to answer. He didn't need to defend himself. The stories were already legendary. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, eyes twinkling, and spoke with calm authority. "People see what they want to see. They hear the headlines and the songs, and they build a story in their minds. But it's not reality. Everyone's life has its chaos. Mine just happens to be on stage." A hush fell over the shop. Even the barber, who had tried to push Ozzy's buttons, stopped moving for a moment. The other customers, phones in hand, waited silently, sensing that a rare insight was about to unfold. The real trick, Ozzy continued, is not to let the world's idea of you define who you are. Respect, patience, a sense of humor, those are what keep you sane. Not the fame, not the chaos, not the stories. The barber laughed nervously, then smiled, realizing he had underestimated the man in his chair. "So you're not a maniac, then?" he asked, almost sheepishly. Ozzy chuckled, a deep, melodic laugh that seemed to fill the room. "Maybe a little," he said with a wink, "but the important thing is I'm not hurting anyone. And if I can make music and bring people joy, a few wild stories are just part of the fun." The room lightened. Customers exchanged smiles, some shaking their heads in disbelief. They had expected confrontation, drama, or arrogance, but instead, they witnessed humor and humility from someone whose legend could have easily justified ego and aggression. You know, Ozzy added, leaning back in the chair, people assume I'm crazy because I sing about madness, but true madness, he said, pausing for effect, is thinking you have to judge someone by a story you've heard instead of seeing them for who they are. The barber froze again, scissors midway through a cut. He had been humbled, and there was no denying it. A quiet admiration filled his expression as he continued the trim more carefully than before. He even smiled, realizing he was learning a lesson from the very man he had thought he could mock. Life's better with a laugh, Ozzy said softly, and it's easier when you treat people as people, not legends or monsters. That's my advice, and it works for haircuts too. The customers laughed quietly, phones recording every word. They were witnessing more than a haircut. They were witnessing a masterclass in charm, wit, and the power of calm. Ozzy's aura transformed tension into connection, turning skepticism into admiration and judgment into reflection. Have you ever misjudged someone based on rumors or reputation? Comment below, we want to hear your story. By the time the haircut was halfway done, the barber was relaxed, almost grateful. What began as a tense, awkward encounter had become a shared lesson in humility, humor, and human understanding. Ozzy's wit had softened the room, leaving everyone quietly inspired. The audience, too, is hooked. They've seen the tension escalate, witnessed the calm and humor of a living legend, and now they are eager for the next moment, the one where recognition, fascination, and perhaps a little viral chaos will fully reveal the story's charm.
Oh my God, look at that.
He's really going for it.
This is hilarious.
Keep going, man.
The barber continued cutting, now with a steady, almost reverent hand, but the whispers in the room grew louder. One of the younger customers, unable to contain his excitement, leaned toward his friend and muttered, "I think that's really Ozzy Osbourne." The word spread like wildfire. Another customer peeked over, eyes wide. Phones emerged from pockets faster than anyone had anticipated. Cameras, once discreet, now recorded every subtle expression, every gesture, every calm, knowing smile. The barber froze mid-snippet, his fingers hovering over the scissors. He had recognized the signs, the relaxed confidence, the effortless charm, the aura of someone who had spent decades commanding the stage. The man he had assumed was a maniac was, in reality, a living legend. "No way, that's the Prince of Darkness." Someone whispered. "That's the guy who sang Paranoid." Another added. The recognition transformed the room. Nervous tension gave way to awe. Customers leaned closer, cameras recording, while the barber's earlier boldness faded into respectful admiration. He realized he was sitting in the presence of a man who had shaped music, inspired millions, and survived the wildest rumors with dignity and humor. Ozzy, noticing the shift, remained calm, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. He didn't boast, he didn't demand attention. He simply smiled, relaxed in the chair, as though the recognition were nothing more than a small, amusing footnote in his day. One customer, braver than the rest, quietly asked, "Can I take a picture?" Ozzy chuckled softly, leaning slightly toward the camera, giving a warm, approachable smile. It wasn't arrogance. It was the ease of a man who knew his legacy and didn't need to flaunt it. The barber, now fully aware, muttered under his breath, almost to himself, "I can't believe I just said what I did to him." A wave of admiration washed over him. He realized the man in his chair, the so-called maniac, was humble, witty, and profoundly human. The aura of chaos had been nothing more than stories blown out of proportion. Phones continued recording, whispers of awe spreading. Soon, snippets of the encounter were being uploaded online. Within hours, the clip began to circulate on social media. Ozzy Osbourne calmly handles barber jokes about being a maniac. Comments poured in, legendary, so humble and funny. I misjudged him completely. Ozzy's calm wit, his ability to diffuse tension, and his subtle moral lesson were now viral. The narrative had shifted entirely. The man once labeled a maniac was now a symbol of humor, humility, and human relatability. Even the barber, now a part of this unexpected viral moment, smiled with a mix of pride and embarrassment. His bold remarks had become the catalyst for one of the most charming celebrity encounters anyone had captured in years. "It's funny," Ozzy said softly as the haircut finished. "People expect the worst of you based on stories, but the truth. Most people just want a laugh, a moment of connection, and a little respect." The room, once tense and awkward, now buzzed with admiration and energy. The barber, the customers, and even the cameras had all witnessed a rare glimpse of humanity and humor from someone the world had built myths around. Have you ever met someone whose reputation didn't match reality? Comment below with your story, and share if you've ever been surprised by a legend in real life. As Ozzy left the shop, the clip continued to circulate, inspiring millions online. The myth of the maniac was dismantled, replaced by the reality of a man who could command a stage, navigate fame, and still charm a barber with nothing more than calm wit and humility. The bell above the barbershop door jingled once more as Ozzy Osbourne stepped outside into the afternoon sun. His haircut was perfect, his hoodie still casually pulled up, sunglasses perched just so. The small shop behind him buzzed with energy, customers replaying phone clips, whispering excitedly, and the barber shaking his head in disbelief. Within minutes, snippets of the encounter were online. Social media erupted, fans sharing the story, commenting on the rare glimpse of Ozzy's personality, and marveling at how effortlessly he had handled the situation. The hashtag #OzzyHaircut quickly began trending, and the phrase "not a maniac, just humble and funny" started circulating across platforms. The barber, who had opened his mouth with jokes moments ago, now sat back in the chair with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. He had learned a lesson he would never forget. The man he had teased, the so-called wild rock star, had demonstrated patience, humility, and charm beyond his reputation. Ozzy, meanwhile, walked calmly down the street, letting the moment pass naturally. He didn't boast. He didn't gloat. To him, this was simply another day, another small interaction, another chance to show that people were more than the stories told about them. People love to judge. He later told an interviewer when asked about the clip, but judging someone without knowing them, that's where the real mistake happens. We all have stories, chaos, and wild sides, but we also all have humor, humility, and moments of connection. That's what matters. The clip continued to go viral. Millions watched it. Fans shared it with friends, posting comments like, "Wow, he's actually so down to earth. I misjudged him completely. Humble legend. This is the Ozzy I wanted to meet." Even those who had never been fans of his music found themselves inspired by the encounter. It was more than a celebrity story. It was a human lesson in respect, humor, and grace under scrutiny. The barber himself began sharing the story with friends and family. He chuckled as he recalled how bold he had been, how nervous he felt mid-conversation, and how Ozzy's calm wit had turned the entire situation on its head. "I thought I was confronting a maniac," he said, "but he showed me patience, humor, and respect. I'll never forget it." For the audience watching the viral clip, the takeaway was clear. Reputation is only a story until proven by real interaction. And even someone who seems larger than life can teach the simplest, most human lessons: humility, humor, and the importance of treating others with respect. Have you ever misjudged someone based on stories or reputation? Type respect in the comments and share your story. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible, inspiring encounters like this one. By the end of the day, the story had traveled across continents. Fans marveled not just at Ozzy's music or his wild history, but at his ability to remain grounded, witty, and entirely human. The myth of the maniac was replaced with a new story, the story of a legend who could command the world's attention and still connect with people in the simplest, most powerful way. The barber shop, once just a quiet spot for a trim, had become the stage for an unforgettable lesson. And the internet, it had never stopped talking.